Aliyah Boston puts on a masterclass. Lexie Hull gets a big bump on the noggin, and Aerial Powers shows that she is quite the rebounder, where the Indiana Fever blow out the Seattle Storm 95-75.
So let's get one thing straight. Caitlin Clark wasn't even in the building, and the Indiana Fever still steamrolled the Seattle Storm like they were a junior varsity team. Aliyah Boston didn't just show up, she unleashed a demolition derby in the paint. And Lexie Hull, she got bonked in the head, walked it off like it was a fly swat, then came back to finish the job. You'd think the Storm would have taken advantage of Clark's absence. Nope. They played defense like folding chairs. It was 95-75, and it wasn't even that close. But here's where it gets hilarious. Seattle's supposed playoff roster looked completely cooked. They still got out hustled by a team missing its biggest star.
Team effort.
AB, 1,000th career rebound. Fastest player in Fever history to do so.
That's not just a bad night, that's a red alert meltdown. The Fever didn't just survive without Clark, they looked better without her. More ball movement, more team energy, more grit. Nobody was waiting around for Clark to save them. They were out there acting like the court owed them money. And just when you thought they might coast through it, Lexie Hull decided to go full kamikaze. She took a headbutt, left the game, got cleared, and came back to drill a 3 like it was nothing. She didn't need 20 points. She needed one big moment, and she got it.
And Lexie Hull is tough as nails. She took a shot, a headbutt, had to leave. The hope was it wasn't a concussion. Obviously, it wasn't. She comes back in, steps into a 3 confidently, knocks it down.
Aliyah Boston finally remembered who she is, not some polite post player waiting for permission. A first overall pick who was brought in to dominate. She muscled through contact, cleaned the glass, and made Seattle's interior defense look like a broken turnstile.
Aliyah Boston, watch KTV, y'all. She rocking with us. I'm telling you, she listens when we speak. We said we needed Aliyah Boston to go beast mode and start eating, and that's what she did.
And if you were hoping the Storm would punch back, think again. What happened next made the whole arena gasp. Actually, just kidding. Well, the arena was half asleep, but not because of the play, because Caitlin Clark wasn't there. And it turns out, no matter how well the Fever play, the fans are addicted to the Clark show. Still, you can't ignore this. This game wasn't just a win, it was a warning. Indiana's not a one-woman team, and if you still think otherwise, you clearly didn't watch this blowout.
Nonetheless, the Fever hung tough in those games, which probably should have been commended a little bit more given the competition. Then they smack the Seattle Storm.
Let's not sugarcoat this. Seattle collapsed like a dollar store lawn chair. Their bench gave them nothing. Their defense gave them even less. Meanwhile, Indiana looked like they'd been waiting all season for this one chance to show they could win without Caitlin Clark dragging them over the finish line. Aliyah Boston wasn't playing nice. She was bullying people. And it wasn't just for show. She forced double teams, got and ones, made defenders foul out of frustration. This wasn't finesse basketball. This was paint warfare. And if you thought the drama stopped there, it didn't. Lexie Hull decided she was going to give the crowd a full contact highlight reel. First the head collision, then the comeback 3-pointer. And the best part? She only scored 5 points total, but it felt like 50 because everything she did screamed toughness. This wasn't some stat padding night. This was the kind of gritty, grimy, we want it more type of win that nobody expected without Clark.
That team is playing hard. They're playing well. People are coming in and playing well on the fly, and Caitlin Clark has healed up.
And let's talk about Kelsey Mitchell and Erica Wheeler, Sims. They lit up the scoreboard with 21 and 22 points. Sims even banked in a 3 so loud it woke up the dead crowd. But the most shocking part? The Fever made more free throws than Seattle even attempted.
We made more free throws than they attempted. Yo, hey, that is a difference maker for us, and that will be a difference maker for us.
That's not just good offense, that's pure physical domination. Indiana didn't shoot around Seattle, they went through them. And Stephanie White, the Fever coach, was suddenly looking like a genius, at least for now. But even with the big win, let's not pretend this was flawless. Because just when you're ready to throw a party, the weird coaching decisions sneak in again. man, White barely played K. Michaela Timpson, even when they were up by 20. A perfect night to develop young talent, and instead, she got thrown in during garbage time like a forgotten side dish. Why? No one knows. Maybe White has a magic 8 ball on the bench and asks it who to sub in. Whatever it is, it makes no sense. And fans notice. You can't burn your starters every night and expect them to be fresh in the 4th quarter of a playoff game.
I did not see that playoff hopes for the Indiana Fever were completely diminished. However, this game was a must-win, and it was very important kind of figuring out where the Fever were.
Still, this night wasn't about rotations. It was about sending a message. And Boston, she sent that message with 2 elbows, a block, and a scream. You'd think a 20-point lead would light a fire under the fans. The arena was so quiet you could hear the popcorn machine in section 312, and there's one reason for that. Caitlin Clark wasn't on the floor. Yes, the Fever were dominating. Yes, Boston was finally living up to the hype, but the electricity, gone. Clark isn't just a player, she's a walking light switch. With her on the court, the building buzzes. Without her, even a blowout feels like a Tuesday practice. But here's what makes that even more impressive. Indiana didn't need the crowd. Boston, Hull, Mitchell, and Sims played with a chip on their shoulder. They weren't trying to go viral. They were trying to prove a point, that the Fever are more than just a solo act, that they have depth, and that when Clark does come back, it won't just be the Caitlin show. It'll be an army. Seattle, on the other hand, looked like they left their game plan in the hotel lobby. No energy, no response, and no bench. Their rotation was so thin it might as well have been printed on tissue paper. Jewell Loyd tried to carry the team again, but there's only so much one person can do when the rest of the squad plays like background extras. And let's give Aliyah Boston her flowers. She didn't just get buckets, she shifted the whole game. Every time she powered through a double team or pulled down a rebound, it collapsed Seattle's defense. That opened up passing lanes, gave shooters space, and forced the Storm to panic. It wasn't just dominance, it was a chain reaction. And that's exactly why the Fever looked smooth, even without Clark. The ball movement was crisp, the spacing made sense. The players weren't taking wild shots. They were running plays, reading mismatches, and exploiting Seattle's soft interior like pros. It's the first time in weeks that the Fever looked like a fully functioning team without needing Clark to orchestrate everything. And yes, the fans were quieter, but the scoreboard, loud and clear. Indiana by 20. No Caitlin needed. Let's take a moment to rewind to what Aliyah Boston's critics were saying. Too passive, too soft, just another big body in the paint. Well, those voices got real quiet after this game. Boston finally unleashed what fans had been begging for all season. She didn't drift around the high post or wait for an opening. She created her own offense, bulldozing defenders, drawing contact, and finishing through fouls. No more timid play. This was war paint mode, and the Storm had no answer. And as if that wasn't already a nightmare for Seattle, Boston's aggression forced the Storm to collapse on her. That left shooters wide open. That meant fewer contested jumpers for Mitchell, and way more drive and kick opportunities for Sims. It's basketball 101, but it only works when your star shows up with fire. And then there's Lexie Hull, who's probably got a dent in her forehead, but still came back to lock up defenders like her job was on the line. 9 rebounds from a guard. That's not hustle. That's hunger. She didn't care about the scoreboard or her box score. She was diving on the floor, boxing out post players, tipping passes. Every single possession, she was disrupting something. That's the kind of energy that doesn't show up in highlights but wins games. And after the Gabby Williams collision, most players would have iced their head and sat out. But Hull walked right back in, pulled up from 3, and nailed it. That's grit. That's confidence. That's the stuff that coaches lose their minds over. It didn't matter that she scored 5 points. The game changed when she was on the court. Meanwhile, Seattle looked totally lost. You'd expect more from a playoff hunting team with names like Skylar Diggins and Nika Ogwumike, but nothing clicked. No chemistry, no adjustments, just ISO ball and tired legs. They looked stunned, as if the idea of Indiana winning without Clark was so unbelievable they forgot to prepare. But the Fever didn't flinch. They leaned into the physicality, they forced turnovers, and they made Seattle look like a lottery team in disguise. Now let's talk about the coaching or the chaos pretending to be coaching. Stephanie White had one job: keep the momentum going, let the starters dominate, sure, but also use the lead to build the bench. What did she do instead? She left K. Michaela Timpson sitting like she forgot she was even wearing a jersey. Up by 20, and Timpson gets thrown in with the mop-up crew in the final minutes. That's not development, that's disrespect. And what that tells us is something much bigger. The Fever are still playing short-sighted. You've got your franchise center finally taking over. You've got Hull setting the tone with pure hustle. Mitchell and Sims are cooking. This is your chance to groom the next tier of role players. And White doesn't even blink. That's how you burn your starters out by September. That's how you enter the playoffs with a top-heavy team and a bench full of spectators. But let's give her some credit. She did one thing right. She let Boston cook. Whether it was scripted plays or just letting her dominate the paint, the offense finally ran through the person it should have been running through all season. When Boston gets touches early and often, everything else opens up. And the best part? She did it without needing Caitlin Clark to feed her the perfect pass. Boston wasn't waiting, she was demanding, posting up strong, calling for the ball, finishing through hits like it was personal. And that version of her, that's the franchise piece fans were promised. But here's the kicker. If she keeps this up when Clark returns, Indiana becomes dangerous. Not good, not decent, dangerous. Because then defenses can't just zero in on Clark. They'll have to choose help on Boston and leave shooters open, or stay home and get shredded in the paint. That's the dream scenario the Fever have been waiting for, and it all starts with Boston believing she's the one who sets the tone. As for Seattle, they looked like they didn't even have a plan A, let alone a plan B. It was a blueprint of what not to do when your opponent is missing their superstar, and to be honest, that made the win even sweeter. The quietest part of this blowout might have been the loudest message. The fans didn't cheer, the crowd barely buzzed, but the scoreboard screamed something no one could ignore. Indiana doesn't need Clark to win. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't filled with logo threes or viral highlights, but it was calculated, clean, and most importantly, complete. This wasn't a lucky game, it was execution from start to finish, the kind of performance that should terrify every other team sniffing the playoffs. And that brings us to the elephant in the room. The narrative. For months, the haters have barked the same line. The Fever are nothing without Clark. Well, what now? Boston just dropped a clinic. Hull played like her contract depended on it. Mitchell and Sims lit up the scoreboard. Even with half an arena that sounded like it needed caffeine, the Fever dismantled a supposed playoff team like they were swatting flies. So what are the haters gonna say now? Oh wait, they're already saying it. No, it's just one game. Seattle had an off night. Clark's still the real reason for the team's success. And yeah, Clark is a game changer, nobody's denying that. But this was a statement that the rest of the roster isn't just sitting around waiting for Clark to go supernova. They've got their own fight, their own hunger, their own identity, and that matters, because in the WNBA, depth is fake news. Most teams look amazing on paper, then completely fall apart when the starters rest. The benches are thin, the rotations are shaky, and the minute one star is out, everything crumbles. But Indiana didn't crumble, they leveled up. And that sets up something even more dangerous. What happens when Clark comes back and finds this team actually clicking? Now you've got Boston with her confidence fully activated, Hull owning the dirty work, Mitchell catching fire, Sims pushing tempo, and now you reintroduce Clark. That's not just a better team, that's a problem for the entire league. This win didn't just silence critics, it gave the Fever a blueprint. Play through Boston, let Hull set the tone, and trust that not every answer starts with Clark. This wasn't just a game, it was a turning point, the kind that separates the might-be-good teams from the definitely dangerous ones. And don't get it twisted, nobody's crowning the Fever champs yet, but this was the kind of win that earns respect, that forces everyone watching to go, wait, did they just destroy a playoff team without their franchise player? And here's what makes that even wilder. A year ago, this same Fever squad was scraping the bottom of the standings. Fans were begging for anything, a close loss, a competent half, even a competitive quarter. Now, they're dropping 30-point blowouts and getting shrugged off because Caitlin Clark wasn't on the floor. That's how fast expectations have changed. And it's not a bad thing. It means this team has raised the bar. It means the fans expect greatness now. They expect wins. And most of all, they expect the whole team, not just Clark, to deliver. Which brings us back to the point. They just did. Boston shook off the criticism and played like she wanted the entire league to remember her name. Hull ate glass and took hits like she was getting paid per bruise. Mitchell stayed efficient. Sims brought the tempo. It was balanced, bold basketball. And here's the irony that nobody wants to admit. This win gave Indiana more power than any Clark highlight reel, because now the opponents can't just build a wall around Clark and call it a day. They've got to think twice about doubling her because Boston's lurking, Hull's crashing, Mitchell's waiting. That changes the whole scouting report. Seattle looked completely unprepared for this. They thought Clark's absence meant cruise control. Instead, they walked into a beatdown. That's what happens when a team is tired of being seen as a one-player show. They don't wait for validation. They take it. And honestly, that's the kind of win that sticks. One that reminds the locker room that we're not here to be Clark's entourage. We're here to be a real team, a playoff threat, a nightmare matchup, even without the jersey sales and the viral clips. Let's zoom out, because this win shook more than just the standings. It hit the heart of the WNBA's current identity crisis. Right now, this league is begging for storylines, feuds, rivalries, anything to get people tuning in past the highlights. And this game delivered more narrative fuel than a reality show reunion episode. Aliyah Boston versus Seattle's bigs, Lexie Hull versus Gabby Williams, Caitlin Clark in street clothes wearing custom Nike gear like a courtside CEO. This wasn't just a basketball game, it was drama in motion. And you know what makes that even funnier? The team most accused of being too dependent on Clark just handed out a beatdown without her. That's poetic. The same critics who scream she's the whole team had to watch Boston body defenders, had to watch Hull bleed hustle, had to watch Indiana play their best ball with Clark clapping from the bench. You can't spin this one. It wasn't luck, it wasn't a fluke, it was just better basketball. And if the league's smart, they'll lean into this, because the truth is, fans don't just want elite stats. They want moments, grit, personality. They want Lexie Hull taking a headbutt and still diving for rebounds like her rent's due. They want Boston screaming after an and one. They want to know who's stepping up when the star is out. That's what makes this game so important. It proved that Indiana isn't just a supporting cast. They're a team with multiple faces, and all of them are ready to steal the spotlight when needed. And it proves something else too. If this version of the Fever shows up consistently, nobody's safe. They've shown they can punch up. Now the challenge is to do it again and again and again. Not just when Clark is out, but every time the ball tips. Consistency has been their enemy. One night they destroy Seattle, the next they stumble against a bottom tier team. But this game, this was the blueprint. Now they know what it looks like when Boston leads, when Hull grinds, when Mitchell scores without forcing, when Sims drives like a blur. When it all clicks, they're a playoff problem. So the question becomes, will this be the turning point or another one off? The league is watching. The critics are quiet for now, and the Fever, they just proved something important. They're not just holding the spotlight, they're earning it. Let's stop pretending this was some happy accident. This wasn't Indiana getting hot from three. This wasn't Seattle having a weird off night. This was a full team stepping up, executing, and making a point, even without the player that ESPN can't stop talking about. And what happened next sealed the entire vibe shift. Indiana didn't let up, not in the third, not in the fourth. They pushed the lead, forced bad shots, rotated cleanly, and played like a unit that's tired of the disrespect. And it's working. Every piece showed value. Boston gave them power inside. Hull gave them toughness. Mitchell gave them buckets. Sims gave them tempo. Everyone else filled in with just enough to overwhelm a Seattle team that, let's be honest, looked checked out. This win changed more than the standings. It changed the perception. The Fever have been branded as Caitlin Clark's team since the draft. Every headline, every broadcast, every mic'd up clip, it's all been Clark-centric. And yeah, she deserves the spotlight. She moves tickets. She breaks records. She's magnetic. But this was the rest of the roster yelling through a megaphone, "We're still here." And the best part is, it wasn't even close. They didn't sneak by. They didn't win on a buzzer beater. They demolished Seattle by 20, and they did it playing real basketball. Inside out, unselfish, aggressive, not gimmicks, not desperation shots, just pure execution. And now the rest of the league has to rethink their whole game plan. You can't just triple team Clark anymore and hope Indiana folds. Now you've got to worry about Boston posting up, Hull crashing boards, Sims attacking downhill, and Mitchell heating up. And if Clark is back on top of that, that's a nightmare for every defensive coordinator in the league. This was more than a win. It was a line in the sand. The Indiana Fever aren't just Caitlin Clark's backup dancers. They're hoopers, fighters, problem solvers. And for one full game, they didn't just survive without her, they thrived. Aliyah Boston silenced every soft label by bulldozing Seattle's front court. Lexie Hull turned a head injury into a highlight reel of grit and chaos, and everyone else followed that energy. But here's what should really make the rest of the WNBA nervous. This game wasn't even the best version of Indiana. Boston missed a few easy layups. The bench still needs real structure. The rotations were questionable. The crowd energy was half asleep, and they still won by 20. If that's what a flawed Indiana looks like without Clark, imagine what happens when things click and she's back leading the charge. This isn't a Cinderella story. This is a team that's finally waking up to its potential. And yeah, the haters are still gonna bark. They'll say Seattle wasn't ready. They'll say the crowd didn't care. They'll say it won't last. But the scoreboard doesn't care about excuses, and neither does Boston or Hull or anyone on that roster who just got a taste of what it feels like to dominate without the shadow of Clark swallowing the spotlight. This was the kind of win that tells the locker room, we don't need to wait on Caitlin to be great. We just need to play our roles and keep the pressure on. Because when this team plays like this, they're not just better, they're dangerous. So if you're one of those critics still clinging to the Clark or bust theory, you might want to go ahead and toss that one in the trash. If you're enjoying this kind of content and want to keep seeing the truth about the W, make sure to hit that subscribe button and support the channel. Thank you.